bell tower had been locked from the inside. That was the first thing that didn't make sense. It was not the last. I stood in the cloister below, looking up at the place where the stone met the sky, and tried to think about physics, trajectory, velocity, the merciless arithmetic of a body in descent. Because thinking about anything else would mean thinking about the man himself, about the voice that had read Catullus with such tenderness that even Petra had cried, about the last thing he had said the week before he died. Some texts are not meant to be translated, they are meant to be survived. He said it like a warning. I understand now that it was. St. Crispin's Academy sits on the Welsh borders, housed in a former Benedictine priory. 8 centuries of stone, the cloisters are intact. Students still walk them between classes, their footsteps echoing off walls, worn smooth by 800 years of passage. The school library contains a locked case of medieval manuscripts. The headmaster refers to it without irony, without explanation, as a collection we do not discuss. Professor Hale discussed it constantly. The Academy's motto is carved above the main gate: Lux in Tenebris, light in darkness. I have thought about that motto every day since October. I'm still not sure it means what they intended. There were 6 of us in his final seminar group. We met weekly in the professor's private study for readings of Catullus and Ovid, candlelight, cold stone, Latin that had survived 2,000 years just to be read aloud in a room like that. I called it the best part of being at St. Crispin's, until it became the worst. Petra Varga is the sharpest person I have ever met. She grew up in Budapest, the daughter of an archivist, and learned early that the difference between history and mythology is documentation. She came to St. Crispin's on a full academic scholarship and treated every seminar like a court proceeding. Evidence only, no speculation. She argued we should give the manuscript to the police. She was probably right. She will never forgive herself for not leaving when she had the chance. I will never forgive myself for not making her. Octavia Black is harder to describe. She came from somewhere in Cornwall, from a family she rarely mentioned, and a childhood she mentioned even less. She wore shawls over her uniform and wrote poetry in Latin and Welsh in the margins of her philosophy notes. She read tarot cards between seminars, not for entertainment, she said, but for orientation. She understood what the manuscript meant before any of us did. Not because she was cleverer than Petra, because she was listening to something the rest of us couldn't hear. There were others in the seminar group. This is not their story. The groundskeeper found the body at dawn. The tower door was locked from the inside. The professor had fallen from the summit or jumped. The coroner ruled it an accident. The coroner had not read what I read that morning. I arrived before the police. The medieval text the professor had been translating was open on the lectern. I read the page it was open to. I read it once, and I understood enough to be afraid. When the police returned with a camera, the page was blank. The words were gone. But I had already seen them. The text described a ritual, a binding, to be performed at the summit of the tower on the feast of St. Crispin. The feast of St. Crispin is the 25th of October. It was the 22nd. We had 3 days. The manuscript was not what it appeared. It was not a history of the Academy's founding, as the professor had believed. It was a contract. Written in a mixture of Latin and Welsh, it recorded an agreement between the priory's first abbot and an unnamed party. A pledge that the priory would serve as a house of keeping for a specific object. The nature of the object was never stated directly, but the margins told their own story. Annotations in different hands, spanning 5 centuries. Warnings, clarifications, In one case, a plea for forgiveness. The professor had believed the object was still somewhere on campus. His death suggested he was right. I took the manuscript. I know how that sounds. I took it because the professor had given his life for it, and because the page had gone blank before the police could photograph it, and because I had the distinct and terrible feeling that the manuscript had decided to be found by me specifically.